Well, welcome back to episode 2 of Vows and Visuals. Here I got Will with me again.
What's up?
How you doing? So let's dive a little bit into, let's talk about like your wedding over this weekend. How was it? How did it go?
For sure. So we actually had two weddings. They were both in northern Montana. So we went to Havre first on Saturday, and it was a really fun wedding. It was kind of weird though, because like usually weddings are like 30 minutes to an hour behind, and we ended up like leaving 2 hours early just because like we were already done with everything.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, we worked from like 2 to 8 and like got all the content that we needed, which I think is kind of a cool thing that we'll go into in the future, is like shooting for the edit and like knowing when you have what you need. And then the next day we drove all the way across northern Montana where it's flat and super boring, and went to Glacier National Park and shot an elopement, and that was so cool. Definitely awesome. A learning experience though, because it was super windy, rainy. Definitely had to like work in kind of a short timeline. So yeah, how about your weekend?
That's awesome. No, it was great. I also had 2 weddings this weekend. One was down in Red Lodge at Fox Fields, which was just awesome. It's a brand new, like they built a brand new like barn and everything there, which is super, super cool.
Nice.
The party for that wedding was just wild, which was crazy. I mean, by
that
the
makes
end
a
of the
world
night,
of difference, doesn't it?
Oh, it was crazy. Like by the end of the night, I mean, I don't know if anybody could even stand. It was ridiculous. But and my second wedding, it was out down in Whitehall, and it was just another super fun wedding. We had to deal with like a little bit of adversity during the day, just because it was just pouring. I mean, the ceremony was supposed to be outside. It was a beautiful day with just like beautiful overcast, and then it just started downpouring for about a good hour and a half, 2 hours. So we moved the entire ceremony inside, which isn't always ideal, but
yeah, it's crazy like how like rain like really like it's such a vibe, but it's so hard to shoot in, especially with like the cameras that we use and them not being water sealed and stuff.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, yeah. It was hilarious. Like I had jackets that go on all the cameras for all my B cams and stuff. And you should have seen with like my gimbal, it just wrapped in like plastic bags and gaff taped all the way around. Nice. And then we moved it inside, so I have to tear it all back down. It was pretty funny, but it was a great wedding over the day. So sweet. Awesome. Let's jump into the episode and let's roll an intro. Your wedding this weekend a little bit in more detail, because I know you had a same-sex couple for the first time, and how did that work?
For sure. No, it was an awesome opportunity. You know, we've never done it before, like you said, and it was definitely a learning experience. You know, posing's different than what we had expected, so definitely a learning experience, but like such a cool opportunity. The coolest people ever, and just had such a good time. So you know, we learned a lot. I think we got a really good video. We also did photos for it too. Super jacked with how it all turned out and like how much we learned from it. So
that's awesome. So what part of Glacier were you in, and how was that? I know you've only shot there how many times before?
Twice.
Twice. How was that dealing with like that, and like you said, with all the wind and stuff?
It was cool. So like the last time we were up there was on West Glacier, which usually isn't that windy. But coming from like the high line of Montana where it's super flat and windy like all the time, into like the East Glacier side, it's so crazy because it's like extremely flat for like 200-300 miles, and then the most beautiful mountains you've ever seen. So you know, there's just like a lot of adversity that you have to work with, you know, with like the east side being so windy, and it started raining and you know all of that. But long story short, you know, it turned into like one of the most beautiful days. You know, and just like from the experience I've learned over the last couple years of, you know, shooting in wind and like rain, you know, the audio turned out really good. I was very, very shocked with that. Audio is key, by the way. Audio can definitely make or break a film. So, you know, it's possible to get, you know, good audio even in wind. So I was pretty proud of myself on that one.
That's awesome. How did you set up running? Because like you said, it's same-sex couple with 2 brides. How did you end up routing your wires and stuff like that with your lavaliers into their dresses and stuff?
So
for people out there,
we showed up after they already had their dresses on. Usually we have like a leg strap that's white, and you'd put like your DJI mic or Rode like down in that strap, and then run like a white lav mic up, and then use like the little like sticky things. But we didn't have the opportunity to do that, so I kind of just had to wing it, and I literally put a DJI mic on a tree branch remotely close to them in the wind, and I was like, this is like the only opportunity I'm gonna have. And they were gonna do their vows again during the ceremony, so I was like, okay. And so I was like so nervous, and it's crazy how good the audio turned out from that. Like, blew me away. And then for the ceremony, I just threw a lavalier mic on the officiant, and he ended up walking away during their vow reading, so I didn't get any of that audio. But the private vows worked super good. So all in all, lessons learned. Definitely want to show up, I think, a little bit earlier and get their dress laved up and stuff.
Right.
So
Absolutely. Well, like when I do it, I mean, I'll always clip because a lot of brides wear under their dresses sometimes Spanx. They'll have underwear or a bra, something like that. So what I'll normally do is I'll clip it right onto the back of that with my, I use the Rode wireless go-tos, and then I'll run it up with a white lavalier, of course. Run it through. I normally run it about under their like armpit through, and then I'll put it with those little stickies like you're saying, which we'll link in the episode, right into about like the bra padding of it and stick it right there.
for sure.
Is about how I run it. Have you ever ran into a situation during a day where a bride isn't comfortable or anything like that with you running it through?
Not at all, and the funny thing is like I've always been able to get away without even miking the bride. But usually like in our, consultation calls or, just sometime throughout the process before, I always like to reach out and just ask. And that way they kind of know. And there's a lot of YouTube videos out there that you can like send to the bride and be like, this is what we're doing. We work with brides, grooms like 24/7. So like, we just want you to be comfortable, and, we've seen it all, so don't worry. So, no, I haven't really had an issue. Have you?
No, I've never ran into an issue of it. I just asked because that was one of the like biggest fears I had, being two males in the wedding industry like that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes from us, like with all of our pre-planning of the wedding day.
For sure.
And going through, and that there, by the time that we get to that wedding, like my goal, like I will keep just reiterating through this entire podcast, is like my goal is to be your friend by the end of this.
Yeah.
So that while I'm there, like the bride and groom and everybody is just so comfortable throughout that day. Even though it is one of the most like awkward situations, because you're literally like, in a weird way, kind of like you're like touching the bride, and you're like you kind of ask, always a little bit awkward, and you're like, hey, is it okay if I touch you?
The groom's on his way to throw some hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. And I just wanted to kind of do a side note on, a lot of the wedding industry uses like the Tascam, like DR10Ls, and that kind of lav mic and stuff, like with the time coding. At first I used the Rode Go-Tos. And then I just found a little bit better luck in like the DJI mics, but just having that opportunity to have internal recording into your camera so you don't have to like line that up in post is so awesome.
It's amazing.
That's like one of the highest things I can recommend. And a lot of like I said, like the higher end wedding videographers, they're gonna use like the DR10Ls and like the big lav internal recording deals, and and at some point I'll probably get to that point, but I can't, stress enough how important audio is. And having like those DJI mics and the Rode Go-Tos are so awesome, especially like when it comes to mic and a bride, because they're so small and you can barely even tell they're there.
Absolutely.
So.
And I actually disagree with you on that, because I think those DR10Ls are awesome. They're an awesome recorder and everything, but I think that they can, in a way, take away from the day.
Oh, 100%.
Because you can see, like, especially for the photographer, can make their job so much harder by having just something big and chunky on the back of, like, in the dress. I love the Rode wireless Go-Tos or the DJI mics, or even Rode came out with their new wireless Pros,
32-bit float,
which is amazing. And I think that is just such a great way to just to like put it in the dress and stuff like that, so that it doesn't look like anything. Nobody even notices it's there.
No, for sure.
So I think it's a great.
Yeah, and it's really cool because, with them being so small, you can literally like put them wherever. And I think Rode even has like the white ones.
Yep.
Yeah, you have to buy them from like Switzerland or something, but
no, it's a great way. Or I've even seen videos where people will spray paint them themselves, even just to be able to. But I've never ran into a situation where I've noticed like the little black box in the dress or anything like that, because it is hidden in there so well and stuff.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely a really good time to live for being a wedding videographer, because of having all the equipment that is accessible for us. So, and they're not expensive. I think DJI mics are like $329, and like the the new ones are like $400 or something.
Yeah, I believe they're $399, and it's a great. I mean, they're just amazing. I couldn't even imagine shooting films back in the day with.
Oh no.
You have no audio. I mean, you're shooting on the old like VHS cameras and stuff like that. Like that would just be crazy. So no, we definitely live in a world now where it's just
Oh, for
gear is so
sure.
affordable for such great quality.
And, kind of piggybacking off what Landon said, having like big, bulky stuff really takes away from the day. You want to be able to have mobility. You want to be able to just like pick up and go. Um, when I was like first starting, it's really easy to go on B&H Photo and be like, oh, I'm going to rig out my camera. It's going to be 400 pounds. I'm going to do all this. But then you get back to a point where you're like, keep it simple. And just having like the portability of those little mics, having cameras that are light, it really saves you work on the day, but also like gives you more time to focus on the day. So
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, as a photographer, I've worked with other videographers who do impede on the day with some of their gear. And they think that they're trying to just be super cool by having all these really big things like shoulder rigs and all this stuff. But just having like a smaller package and just kind of working with what you got is one of the best ways, because your films and the day is going to run so much smoother. And
for sure.
especially as long as you know how to use this stuff. Like I definitely have rigged out my stuff before, and I've noticed it does kind of impede on the day a little bit, because I've used like the whole tilt-a-float system, and I used it for one wedding. I thought it would be the greatest thing ever, and it just ended up being a hassle through the entire day trying to carry this big arm with the gimbal on there. And don't get me wrong, it looks awesome. You look like professional in a sense. You look like a real cinematographer, but it's for a wedding day. I personally don't see a use for it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It can save your body in some ways, but it's just, like I said, you could keep bumping into people, all that stuff, just creating another liability throughout that day and stuff.
100%. Yep.
So I want to change topics a little bit. I want to talk to you about it, how you have started from going from basically like zero to nothing to making over $100,000 a year in the wedding industry.
For sure. Yeah, it's actually a lot easier than it sounds, as long as you have somewhat of a background with film. Like we said in the last episode about like, how I got into this and did that. My first year I really like took all the bookings I could, and was charging like $200 to $2,500 a wedding, and doing like 25 to 30 a year. And, it just got to the point where I was like, I'm going to raise my prices. And once my quality like started to like justify my pricing, I really started to get bookings. And like this year alone, on average, our packages are 3,000 to 6,000, and we're at like 45 weddings this year. So if you do the math there, like that's really good. Plus, and that's only wedding season. So, in the off months, I'm doing like little commercial jobs. I don't really even need to.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
I'm a gearhead, so I like to spend money on all the latest and greatest stuff. So
I think that's why we're great friends, because of that reason. We love spending our money on gear.
That's why I work in the winter too.
That's awesome. So what else? Like, what other steps have you taken to really, like, I know last episode we talked about like Facebook group chats, stuff like that. What do you think what do you think your biggest like marketing you did to be able to book these weddings would be?
Definitely using like Google ads. I spend, anywhere from like $100 to $300 a month on Google ads. And I would say like 80% of our traffic comes through Google or Instagram. A lot of people, they'll post like 2 to 3 times a day, like have this like schedule, like do all this stuff. And, I just don't have the time to, market my social media like that. So I post, a decent amount of stuff on there. But, Google ads has been so amazing for us. And you don't even have to start out with spending $100 to $300 a month. You can spend $50, and, it just opens your horizon to a whole different market of people. Because, when people are looking, you have the people that go on like Instagram and Facebook and like, in search of a videographer. But then you get like the other type of people that go on Google, Montana wedding videographer.
And I think that's a lot how brides do it. They're just literally, especially these out-of-state brides, they're like just finding those keywords to post in that and integrate in your Google ads basically to be able to have it so that when they search on their one Google search of Montana wedding videographer, photographer, whatever that is, that it pops up and your name is up there too. Did you end up taking any classes or anything like that to learn how to do these Google ads? Was it self-taught? What was that look like?
No, it was actually super easy. The Google business listing, is your first step. Like when you search Elevate Media MT on Google, and it pops up with like the pictures and the address and reviews. So you make that, and then you kind of just go through, add keywords, pay for your ads. And I just figured out like, through trial and error of like what keywords worked for us. And, overall super easy process. They make it like the easiest thing ever. So
That's awesome. No, I agree. Cause like I said, I haven't even set up mine yet
dude,
and I
that's
need
crazy.
to.
For sure. Another thing is definitely, you know, and this goes hand in hand with those Google ads because you need somewhere for those people to go, is a good website, you know, and you want to keep it personalized to you. And, you know, like me, I have my business with Carson. So, you know, it's all about me and Carson, our business, you know, about us, our dog, you know, what we offer. You want to just have all of this information, but you don't want to go overboard with it because you've seen like, you know, when a potential bride's like looking at your stuff, you don't want like 16 packages with like, oh yeah, I'm shooting 10-bit 4K and
Absolutely. I
S-Log 3,
mean,
blah, blah,
most
blah.
brides aren't even going to know what that means. All they really care
No.
about is like, oh, do we like your style? Do we like
Yeah.
how the color grade looks? All that stuff all
Yep.
the way through. So have you noticed from having just like Elevate Media versus how a lot of photographers and videographers do it, having your like names as Carson and Will basically in there, have you noticed that hinder your business at all or anything like that?
Not at all. Our business is substantially growing. I think in the future, we'll definitely, you know, make it a little bit more personal. But at the time when I started the business, you know, Elevate Media was just like what I wanted to get into because I wasn't really even planning on doing like mostly weddings. I was, you know, a commercial side and freelance stuff and, you know, all that. So I don't think that it hindered at all. And it's kind of cool because it takes away from the personal side in a sense. So like say me and Carson get sick, like we have backups. It's not Will and Carson and then they show up and it's Billy and Joel or something.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of cool. Long story short, that doesn't really happen being sick for weddings. Like unless you're absolutely dying, show up to your weddings.
Absolutely.
So,
And I don't believe either one of us have even ran into a situation like that before in our wedding
Yeah.
businesses. And I mean, if you do, like I've seen other videographers and photographers who have or decide to be like, oh, I'm just going to associate shoot it because I'm going on vacation and stuff. And it's terrible. It ruins the day for the couple. It's just a really terrible experience, which I've noticed
Yep.
for them. So that's one thing I've noticed is like I basically tell my couples like I always have some sort of backup. If like you guys aren't booked, it would be you guys as a recommendation of like I will pay for it. I'll still edit it and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
like I said, we've never ran into a situation like that where it's had to happen. It's basically if we're dying, is in a sense.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and like we've had a couple deals where like, oh, I should stand closer to my mic. We've had a couple deals where like, you know, the bride and the groom, they're just sort of like sick of looking, and they just like really want to knock it out. So like we've networked with a lot of, you know, photo video teams and that kind of thing. And, you know, we had 2 this year that we kind of like subcontracted and we still do the editing, you know, it's to our style. We like handpicked who's doing it. We trust them, that kind of thing. So I don't know if we'll do that in the future. I think Landon and I have some plans coming in the future, so stay tuned for that.
Absolutely.
So, you know, and that's another cool thing with like it being Elevate Media is that we have the possibility to kind of subcontract, but we don't want to step into that route. I think we just want to keep it like personal. So
No, absolutely. I agree. Cause I mean, like I said, that couple is really hiring you for just your style and your vision, your eye. Cause I mean, I feel like photo in a sense, like, yes, somebody can still shoot the photos and it's still a little bit different of your style, but you can get them pretty close with your editing. But I think video is just so different in that aspect because of how you're doing camera movements, how you're posing the couple, just all these different stuff throughout the day that can really change your films. I mean, like I said, we shoot, and I talked about it in the last episode, but we shoot with the same cameras and basically a lot of the same color grades, but we look at our films and they are completely different. They're still beautiful, but just so substantially different. And you could easily tell like, oh, this is Landon's, this is Will's, or, you know, just between.
For sure. So have you, you know, experienced like, you know, word of mouth, like working with other vendors, like that helping you with like booking?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And honestly, for the first 2 years of my business, that's really what it's been. I've ran a few Facebook ads here and there still. I don't know why Facebook is so difficult to run ads through, but most of my business comes through that word of mouth. And I think that's a huge part of just like how you present yourself in the day to retain those. Cause I've had a few couples have friends in the wedding party or stuff like that who decide to get married. And then they're like, oh my gosh, your video was amazing. Your photos were amazing. And then they'll be like, who did yours? We'd love to do that. And then they reach out to me, which has been super cool. And I've been able to have, like I talked in the last episode, it'll probably come up every episode. Amber, who's one of my best friends out of Billings,
She's awesome.
and no, she's absolutely amazing. Her photos, everything is, and the way she runs it is just so amazing.
For sure.
And that's honestly kind of how I structured my business, is how it is, because I've worked with other vendors who are very high strung, very high stress throughout the day, and that's just not the type of couples that I like to attract. I
for
like
sure.
those couples who are just through their day. I want them to be happy. And like I said, I want by the end of that day that we're just friends. I want it to feel like I'm just not like just some random guy with a camera. It's more like, oh, it's Landon, your friend with a camera, so that everybody's so comfortable throughout the day. And she's, like I said, she's helped me grow my business from 0 to nothing, or from 0 to like 100. And it's just been amazing. And just that word of mouth is so huge. And her business is basically fully run on word of mouth, which is insane. And
That's
she's
crazy.
And I mean, she's pushing some serious numbers for her just photo. She doesn't do video or anything like that. And I mean, like I said, like we can go just about anywhere in an airport and she'll know somebody. And it's the craziest thing ever. And I'm like, dude, we got to figure something out. Like, how do you know everybody everywhere? Which is just a really cool way. And just creating those relationships with these other vendors is so important throughout the day. Like, one of the first things I always do from the day when that DJ shows up is like, I'm introducing myself, because during that ceremony, like I always have backup audios, but for that ceremony, I need to plug into his board. And if we don't have a good relationship, like he's not going to help me and I'm not going to help him, basically.
Oh yeah. I've heard so many horror stories about that.
Absolutely. And it's terrible. And like I said, we talked about it in the last episode also, but like with those like relationships, it's so important to have, because like I said, I've worked with other DJs who are just absolutely terrible and stuff, but like I said, I always go and I meet with them right away. I'm like, hey, I'm Landon. I would love to just plug into your board if you're cool with that. And most of the vendors and DJs now we're very friendly and stuff like that. And we go to weddings and they will even like run the audit. If I'm running around managing like B cams and stuff right before the ceremony, because sometimes it gets hectic, they'll even be like, yep, I started the recorder for you. You're all good to go. Don't even worry about it. Yep. And it's awesome. So it's very like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
For
on
sure.
wedding days.
Yeah. And, just to piggyback on that, like we've had a bunch of like inquiries from other vendors that we've worked with, even venues going on and getting on like a venue's preferred list is awesome. And even just like, tagging the vendor or like the venue, making sure that's another thing that we'll go into as well. But making sure that like you give every vendor the same respect that they give you. Because like I said, we've gotten so many inquiries from them. And, like with the DJs, that's a very important thing, because like you're taking your equipment and plugging it into their equipment. They don't have to like let us do that. So we're super thankful for that. And, we've been very fortunate to work with Joe's DJ service a bunch here in Bozeman. And, all of their guys are so awesome and like really help us out. So, sorry to steal your thunder.
No, you're all good. No, I agree though.
Yeah.
It's absolutely like that, because if you don't build those relationships with these other vendors, like they're going to, like I said, they could absolutely ruin those speeches for you, those ceremonies, just by clearing that. And like I said, we always have backups for that reason. But I mean, when we have that, plugging these super high quality recorders into their boards and stuff, and them actually paying attention enough and caring enough to be able to help you out by running those audio levels and stuff like that.
Yeah,
is
because
super helpful.
We've even thrown like a DJI mic on their mic for like speeches and stuff, and it can cause interference. So definitely have backups, and having DJs that know what they're doing is very important too. You really want to gauge that out, mostly because a lot of them will like mix the audio halfway through, and then kind of plays with your emotions a tad when you go to edit and your stuff is like blown out or like not even there. So
no, I totally get that. That's awesome though.
So do you have any tips on, like how to go from 0 to 100K?
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing, like I said, is like we talked about last episode too, is reaching out to those photographers and videographers. And like I said, second shooting. And like we said, we're so busy. So reaching out to them and doing that and just creating these relationships with these other like venues, vendors, all this stuff. Like I know a lot of photographers and videographers who will even send care packages for like holidays and stuff like that to these venues, so that name is in the back of their head always, in reaching out, being like, hey, I would love to be this preferred vendor. I've shot out here before. Or maybe even if you haven't, like, hey, I would love to book weddings. I think your venue is absolutely beautiful. Everything you guys do about it. Because they're going to be wanting to book those clients also. So basically the way that a wedding kind of breaks down from start to finish is it always starts, the couple will book that venue first. They'll pick their day, find that. The next step is they reach out to that photographer, find it, see if they're available. And if they are, book it. And if that comes from a Google search, if that comes from the venue, that's even more awesome because they're like, they've shot out here before, or we've met them personally and they're so awesome running a day, or just their personality is so, so nice of a person. And then they'll go down, the couple will go down and they'll basically work on finding a videographer. And then it goes from videographer, DJ, caterer, and then anything little throughout the day.
For sure.
Or planner.
I've also seen it other ways too, where like, videos on the side burner. The importance of video is not where it should be right now. A lot of people are like, we'll just kind of see where our budget goes and then possibly go into that. So we've had a lot of inquiries that are like 2 months before the wedding and they're like, we weren't going to do it and we have the money. So let's do it. So,
absolutely. So like, let's go a little bit deeper into that. Like what value do you think you bring as a videographer to a wedding day that separates from like just having a photographer, and why people should book a videographer?
This is such an interesting question, and it's honestly kind of tough to answer because I feel like the answer is in the footage. People see their wedding like photos and they're like, damn, these are sweet. And, go through and put them on their wall, do that kind of thing. But there's really like minimal emotion, with video, you get to like look back on everything, the sounds, candid moments of, walking down the aisle, like stuff that you forget about on your wedding day because you're so busy, like, focusing on the day that like you look back at your wedding video and you're like, oh my gosh, like what?
Well, and that's actually what I tell all my clients why it's so, so important is because some of these clients are planning these weddings for up to 2 years and they spend all this time planning and making sure everything for them is just absolutely perfect. And then you get to the day and it's done within like 8 to 10 hours. And they're like, where did it go? Basically. So
yeah. And like video and photo are like pretty much the only things you can take back with you. So
yeah, absolutely. Have you ever seen anything like different that couples do besides the photography and videography throughout the day that is a really neat addition that you would recommend to them?
What do you mean by that?
So I guess I'll go a little bit deeper into it. So I've seen couples before, like a lot of them I think is like creating these little moments throughout the day to create more media. Like I've seen a lot of couples who will bring these like, what are those old like point and shoot film cameras, wind up ones, whatever you call those, is really neat. Or there's a lot of really neat apps out there that kind of emulate that. So I went to a wedding a few weeks ago and the couple had, I believe it was like $10 or something cheap like that, where you could download this app and you only get 10 photos throughout the day, but every guest who was there was able to download this off like a QR code and shoot throughout the day. And it was such a neat addition throughout the day.
For sure. Yeah, I've seen that. I was kind of going to piggyback on like the QR code thing. They put like a little business card with the QR code on like every table and all the guests take pictures and upload them to there. And, that's a super cool thing to do. I've also seen kind of like the content creator side where like the couple will like book somebody with like an iPhone to come through and like just do video all day and then just like hand over the footage.
I've seen that before, actually. Yeah. I was actually talking with Danielle Mullins, who does a lot of elopements and stuff throughout this state of Montana. And there's actually I don't know her name off the top of my head. I can throw it in here if I can find it. But she basically creates just like Instagram stories for you all day. And it was actually one of the super, super neat idea to have somebody who creates those like just phone videos so that you can right after your day, or the second you get home that night, just post all of them or the next morning.
Yeah, no, it's definitely cool to look at it that way. Because our job as videographers is like to have very professional looking, clean, film that takes a bit of time to edit, and if you really want that like instant, the quality's not insane, it's good, but it still captures a day, then I think it's definitely a cool thing. And, we've seen a bunch of weddings where like they'll fly these people in, that just shoot on iPhones, and they have like 5,000 followers and they just come and shoot on iPhones and party hardy. So
yeah, no, it's I think it's a really neat addition, and I don't think it's a replacement for videographers.
Not at all. Yep.
You're not getting all these like I said, these beautiful shots with all these, I'm gonna say it, but these cinematic movements, and I know. But you don't.
Can we beat that out?
But you don't get these like very really beautiful like camera movements and angles and stuff like that you do get with an iPhone. Like, yes, they do have a vision, which is really neat, and they see that for that TikTok side of things.
Yeah.
But being able to create these like moments with like super professional audio and stuff is just amazing. And like we talked about before, like both of our goals to really have this couple by the end of it just crying.
Yeah.
Because you want them to look at that and be like, holy crap, I want to relive this day over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And
that's like the storytelling aspect of wedding filming is like, just having, like a basic storyline where it goes up, and everybody's like all happy, and then it goes down, they're all crying, and then it levels out and it's all happy crying. But you really want to like capture those emotions. And I feel like, just having an iPhone and, doing that, it's more of just kind of like for, like B-roll in a sense, as we call it. Or it's just like random shots throughout the day that you can post. But videography just captures that emotion in a completely different way compared to, any other deal like photography, etc.
absolutely. Well, and one thing that I've been adding that's super neat to all my packages for couples to be able to have kind of more of a raw and very, very candid version of the day is I've been shooting on a Super 8mm camera, which for all you guys out there basically it's an old film camera that shoots video in a Super 8 format that is so, so neat. And it's such a fun way throughout the day to even like one of my favorite things to do is to give it to like the best man or the maid of honor, somebody in the bridal party to just go shoot on it. Cause it's literally point and shoot and you just pull the trigger on it and they get these really cool angles throughout the day. And it's so, so fun. And just gives you a very like nostalgic feel.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we just snagged one the other day actually too.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's a lot of like effects that emulate it. Don't let that get in the way because it definitely is not true.
No,
you see a lot of wedding films where like they throw in a bunch of black and white shots and a bunch of like the Super 8 looking overlays, on like 60 frame per second slowed clips, and you're like, that's not Super 8 because Super 8's like truly, the vibe and the frame rate. I don't even know what frame rate they record on, but like
18,
yeah,
frames per second.
It's just such a cool way to like, or a cool perspective. It's so different. So
absolutely, and that's why I like it. Because then, I mean, even for my couples, like I create like a little care package for their videos. So if they book my biggest package of my photo and video combo, like they get a little tablet that plays their video that they can set on their coffee table, which is super, super neat. They'll get a little flash drive in there also that has like their custom date on it, which is super neat. And then you get, when you add that add-on of the Super 8, they actually get the film roll. So one thing that's really neat that I've noticed is a lot of grandparents still have held on to these like old like film projectors.
Oh yeah.
And they can just go and sit with their family and throw this reel of film on and be able to watch it at the end of it and just see these super raw moments throughout the day. So it's a super neat way to be able to capture a day in a more candid and raw way. So one of the things, let's kind of circle back onto making 0 to 100 basically. Go into a little deeper about that. Like what about that has made you, or what you've done basically to allow yourself to go from 0 to 100 besides like what we talked about before.
For sure. And as a creative, it's really easy to get burnt out, and after like the weddings that we've done this year, I'm like, oh my gosh. And when I first started filming, I started a little business and was doing this and that. And, I was like, what, I'm done with this. I'm so burnt out. Like I don't want to touch a camera. And I gave up. And I picked up a camera again, and I gave up. And I picked up a camera again this time, and I was like, I'm not giving up. And it has been the best thing ever. It's easy to get burnt out. It's easy, to get overwhelmed, that kind of thing. But, just pushing through that and not giving up is, so, so important, and like a lot of people, like we'll have like a bride and groom, like maybe they're upset about, something small that can definitely be fixed. Like, oh, hey, I need this revision, but, and they want all this extra stuff. And like, you're going to have clients like that. And it is definitely a learning experience on how to handle things like that. But don't let that like get to you, like just prevailing or whatever the word is through all of like the obstacles and all that is part of like building a business. Any business that you are in is going to have obstacles. So, just don't give up is my biggest advice too.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. And like we said before, like learning from another photographer or videographer is so important, I feel like, because I mean, especially like we said, before we started this, we've been to maybe 2 weddings in our entire life before this. And now we've seen well over 100 weddings and it's ridiculous. So I definitely agree. And I think that just surrounding yourselves, like we've said before, and we're going to keep reiterating this, just surround yourself with creatives, and going out and shooting just random things to get that feel, because you don't want to go into a wedding day not knowing like your camera through and through. And that is one of the big challenges that I've had to deal with, is switching from Canon to Sony for video and photo and stuff like that. And being proficient in your camera and actually understanding how to use it. Like we were saying in the last episode, like going from like understanding the difference between 8-bit and 10-bit color depths, and
big difference,
all of your frame rates and stuff like that. So I want to actually introduce Carson, Will's girlfriend, and she's going to touch a little bit more into going from 0 to 100, because she has some really good insight on this also.
Yeah, hey guys. So I'm not visually in front of the camera, I'm behind it, but I've been listening this whole time, so I figured I would give my 2 cents. I think something that's really important with going from, like we've been talking about, 0 to 100 is surrounding yourselves with creatives, but also not letting yourself getting discouraged by other creatives, because as videographers and photographers, I think photographers especially, because I do most of the photo work on our side of the business. And, you know, I haven't been one of these like lifelong photographers, been doing it my whole life type thing. I just got into it and literally got thrown into it. I think it's really easily to look at other people's work and get super discouraged by it, being like, why don't my photos look like that? Why doesn't my, coloring look like that? Like, I want to be like that person. And the truth is like photography and videography is an art, and everybody's style is going to be different. And that's what you bring to the table as a creative that makes couples want to pick you and love you in that sense. And so I think just, having in your mind that I have this style that people love and people are going to book me for it. And it doesn't matter if I don't look like, this best photographer that got featured in this magazine and, so-and-so. And so I think that's just super important in not letting yourself get discouraged and letting yourself quit, because that is ultimately going to make or break your business.
I would agree. And have you personally ever ran into a situation where you've started to feel discouraged, even though you have just kind of jumped into this and were thrown into this? Have you ever experienced that yourself?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Like we, follow a lot of like the big magazines up here, like Rocky Mountain Bride and Montana Bride. And when, I first got into it, I've only been doing it for a little over a year. And so when I first started doing it, I was kind of like, didn't really know what I was doing and had to learn the hard way about, posing and finding presets that I like and stuff like that. And, seeing these amazing, gorgeous photo shoots on Instagram and coming from these like top-notch photographers who have been doing it for 10 years, like I was like, I'm never going to get to that level. But the truth is like, I've made leaps and bounds in the past year that I've been doing this. And it's really helped me with my confidence in photography, because I'm like, if I've only been doing this for a year and my photos look like this already, like imagine where I'll be in 10 years when all these photographers have been doing it for that long. So I think that's definitely something that has helped my confidence and really has made me appreciate myself as a photographer and like known my worth.
For sure. Yeah. And, I completely agree with that. And, your entire career, you're always going to have people that are better than you. No matter what business you're in, I don't care if you're laying concrete or
there's always bigger fish in the sea.
Whatever. There's always somebody that's gonna be better than you. But like Carson said, it's an art form, and we're showing our perspective of the day and the art that's being created. And I think a lot of people, once you're in that like smaller budget field, the couples really aren't booking on style; they're just booking to have a videographer. Yeah. But once you step up to like that mid-range, people are like, man, I love your videos. Like, I really want to book you because I love your style, So you just have to be confident in that. And like, you'll get to a point in your business where you're like, you know what? Like, you can look at these people like competition, or you can look at these people like friends. I always looked up to Landon before we even like met. I was like, man, this guy is going to steal my business. He's like so dang good. And like, I just am not confident. And I am like my biggest judge. I judge the crap out of everything I think
we both do. And I think that's super important to do, because if you're not like super critical of your own work and looking at it being like, I'm not a huge fan of this, somebody else is going to look at that. Like, I've looked at your films and I've been like, this is freaking amazing. Like, holy crap. Like, where did this come from? You just like pulled this out of nowhere. And like I said, you got to be critical of it, because if you're not,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to keep improving and getting better and better and better.
For sure. Yeah, and you just have to get to a point where like that stuff doesn't get to you. You have to respect those other vendors and like their way of showing art. And like you'll get there. You just have to find some kind of confidence. Like I just edited this wedding film last night, and I was like, man, like it's good, but it could be better. But then I like look back at my stuff a year ago, and I'm like, what? Like it's insane. So like you just have to be proud of it. You're always gonna judge your stuff. You're always gonna look back at it and be like, man, I wish I was like Stan Giles or Isaac Suttle. Like I wish I was that guy. But you're not. Like I'm Will.
Exactly.
I'm my own person. I'm gonna do this the way that I've experienced, and like let my experience show in my art. So
I think going off of that as well, like obviously you can get really discouraged by, like I said, other photographers and videographers who think are doing so much better than you, but you should also use it as like inspiration, because kind of like what y'all touched on in the last episode, you're not stealing another person's work, but it's inspiring you. You're thinking of new ideas. Like, Will and I pretty frequently will always sit down and like watch somebody that we look up to's wedding films, especially before we go to a wedding, like, oh, I love that shot. I love like this camera movement type thing. And, I'll do the same thing like before every wedding or like photo shoot I go to, or before every photo shoot I go to, I'll always scroll through like Pinterest or, some of the apps that have, posing styles, and all get
And
some
Unscripted
inspiration.
is a great app for that.
Absolutely.
Throughout the wedding industry, for even videography, I've used it for, just to be able to pose your couples and give them that. Like you can add movement, even though all on the Unscripted app is just like for photographers, but it's great for videographers. It's a great resource to use during the day.
My point is like, don't let others tear you down, but instead like use their talents as a way to like make yourself better.
yeah, no, it's respectful.
I would absolutely agree to that. So yeah, let's now jump into some of these like Reddit stories that I found about.
Oh man,
it's gonna be great. I can't wait to see your reaction on it. So let's jump right into
Let's
that.
do
then.
it.
So now we're gonna jump into a little bit of Reddit stories. We're gonna have Carson read them for us, and then we'll kind of react to them and go from there.
Sounds good.
Okay, so this story is from Hey JJ BKCCDR. I was a second shooter for a wedding where the bride got extremely wasted the night before. She was late to hair and makeup, had to keep getting up to vomit. We get to the venue, which is a historic battlefield, so there are tons of trenches around. All through portraits, she had to keep going behind trenches to vomit. She was afraid she was going to throw up during the ceremony. Luckily, she made it, but completely missed the reception. She made her entrance and then just disappeared. I kept shooting because I didn't know what was going on, but finally went to find the main shooter. And she was with the bride, who was with EMS and was getting an IV. The groom was so pissed and kept saying she did this to herself. I wonder if their marriage made it.
Oh my gosh. And we're all victims of, drinking night before some, big things. I mean, like your wedding, that's a little interesting, but, you want to have fun at like your rehearsal and do all that. And it's, important to live in the moment and do that. But, you have to remember that like this is one of the biggest days of your life. And, it's just it's kind of terrifying, and like,
Absolutely.
in
And
our regard too, because what do we do in that situation? Do we keep rolling? We're paid to be there to capture stuff, so
and we're only there for an allotted time slot, basically.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you really want to make sure that like if you're paying for these, like for these really high quality videos and pictures and all that stuff, you definitely want to be able to get the most out of those like 8 to 10 hours that you're there at a wedding day.
Yeah.
So that you're not just, you go look back at your video and you're like, there's no portraits of me. There's no any of this like getting ready stuff because you are vomiting. So it's definitely a good way. You just make sure that you, like, if you do, there's no problem drinking. Like drinking on the day, it's super fun. Just know your limit.
Yeah,
That's the biggest
100%.
thing.
Bring those little like liquid IV pouches. with you.
Absolutely. Waiting for the sponsor from them. But
Yeah.
Liquid IV is a great way through wedding days. I mean, that's in my emergency wedding kit, even to be able to have those. And
Even if I'm not drinking, I always do that because
Absolutely.
it's so easy to get dehydrated on a wedding day.
or
so.
Pedialyte. We used to do that back in high school, even before like football games and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
you
Just
remember
pound
that
the
wedding that we went to together, and I was pounding Pedialytes.
Oh, it's the best way. I mean,
I get dehydrated super fast. I was not drinking the night before, but I was like, I'm gonna die. So
Absolutely. So let's jump into like the top comments on there and see what they have to say about the post.
Yeah, so the top comments, there's 2 of them. It says, "Oh my God, I had a bride who had food poisoning and was vomiting all day. Not her fault. Poor her." And then the second one says, $5, they're either divorced or the groom now also has a drinking problem.
That's amazing.
Oh my
No, and like we were saying before, there's nothing wrong with drinking the night before, but just know your limit.
Yeah.
Because we've even at weddings that I've shot or other photographers that I know have shot, like the bride or groom gets just absolutely obliterated on the day of, and then they show up to the ceremony. I was actually talking to a photographer about it a few weeks ago, how one of her grooms before literally was so drunk during the ceremony that his groomsmen were holding him up during it so that he could stand. And she's like, the pictures were okay, but you can clearly see he's got drunk face and all that stuff. And if these pictures and videos are so important, I mean, you're paying thousands of dollars, upwards of tens of thousands of dollars, even for some of these, for this content. Just make sure you just know your limit.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And, we've seen a lot of grooms, that, like you said, drinking's not a bad thing. But, even before the ceremony, they're just like down in, shooters and have flasks and just absolutely trashed. And, you look back on it and you're like, man, I can't even remember my wedding because I was so drunk, and, having like a shooter tequila and like a couple drinks before your ceremony, like that's cool. But just make sure that you're not like absolutely trashed.
Absolutely. And just like, I mean, like we said, like we keep reiterating it, like there's nothing wrong with drinking because you want to get rid of those nervous jitters for you.
Yeah.
Like that's a great way for people to be able to open up and kind of be themselves in a way sometimes at weddings. Because a lot of people are nervous to stand in front of people, sometimes read those vows. So having a few, just knowing your limit is a great way.
Yeah, it's also like, kind of difficult on our end as vendors too to kind of, especially photographers, because they're, trying to wrestle all these groomsmen that are absolutely wasted, and try to get them in, to get their pictures to all look good, do all that. So, like what am I saying? We, really enjoy, when grooms are drinking and like having a good time, but like you said, within their limits.
Absolutely.
So.
What do you do to like kind of combat that? Like when the groomsmen are not listening and kind of being a-holes in a sense?
Carson's a redhead, so I just send her.
Absolutely makes sense. I mean, I've always found the best. I've always found one of the best ways to do it is to really just give them a lot of crap throughout the day and just almost like not embarrass them, but definitely call them out to where they're like singled out and then they kind of shape up from there is a really, really great way.
Sure.
So that's one of those little secret tips is to understanding.
You definitely have to like banter with them a little bit and just kind of like give them shit
Tough
for it.
love.
But also like as a photographer, I think it's super hard because I've always been a very introverted person my whole life. And so like kind of being around, people who are very outgoing on, like the biggest day of their life was a little bit of an adjustment for me, but not letting it get to you. Like don't, I'm a freaking 5'3", 20-year-old girl and I'm talking to these 30-year-old 6-foot men and I just don't let it get to me. You gotta just stand your ground. So
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's jump into that second Reddit story and
okay. So the second story is by Brains Beauty Braun. And this says, "At last, I have a very good tale for Reddit. My very first wedding that I ever shot was at a golf course, and post-ceremony, we were shooting the bride and groom's couples portraits. When one of the groomsmen, as well as the pastor who performed the ceremony, decided that the alcohol at the open bar during cocktail hour was not good enough for them. We were in a rural community with a golf course at the end of a long road up a hillside. And at the entrance to that road off the freeway, there was a liquor store. So both the groomsmen and the pastor decide that they are going to drive down to the liquor store to pick up a bottle of their favorite to bring back to the event. Only problem was both of them had already been served at least 2 drinks. Well, 30 to 45 minutes later, cocktail hour ends and the guests are herded into the dining hall for the grand entrance of the bride and the groom. We start lining up the bridesmaids and groomsmen for each of them to have their own dancing moment as they come through the doors before the couple. And then it's then that we realize that nobody has seen one of the groomsmen for about 40 minutes now. At first, we assumed they were in the bathroom, or possibly that they had gone out for a smoke break and didn't realize how long they had been gone. Groom says he absolutely cannot do the grand entrance without his groomsmen there as well. So we hold the grand entrance to the reception, dinner, and all for about another hour while we are looking for the missing groomsmen. Kids are screaming, adults are hangry, half the wedding is drunk already, and there's still no idea when dinner will actually be served. People are seriously concerned at this point, wondering if he got lost and what happened to him as he seemingly up and vanished. Finally, a little over an hour after the grand entrance was supposed to happen, we get a call from the local police department. Our missing groomsmen, as well as the missing pastor who had snuck under the radar as we were all frantically looking for the groomsmen, were both sitting in the drunk tank. Both have been arrested on a DUI, just down the street heading to that liquor store. Moral of the story, don't leave a perfectly good free open bar to go and pay for an extra DUI.
That is,
oh my gosh,
that just is absolutely terrible. But one of the things like is just really make sure you plan throughout the day. If you want like a certain type of alcohol, bring it. Like even if there is an open bar, like just plan for yourself. And I know a lot of venues discourage it. Not saying do this, but there is a lot of ways to get around bringing your own alcohol to a venue. And just maybe put it in your car and just, I got to go out to my car for something and go grab it. If that's super, super important to you and the venue doesn't have it.
For sure.
Basically.
You know, and that's definitely something, you know, to talk about too, is like leaving your venue. You know, we've done a couple weddings where, you know, like the reception and the ceremony are in completely different places. And I would like highly recommend that you just pick one venue and stick to that, because anytime you involve a wedding, which there is always alcohol, I don't care if it's a dry wedding, there's people with shooters in the car. You know, it just opens up so much opportunity for something like that to happen, you know, and you know, this isn't necessarily wedding related, but you know, even having like 1 to 2 drinks, you can still get a DUI. So, you know, when I drink now, I drink at home. You know, me and Carson, like, she's not 21 yet. 2 more weeks. Let's go. You know, like, if we ever go out to town and like drink, you know, I don't get obliterated. I try to stay as sober as possible, and like, she drives home. You know, I just don't want to risk anything. It's just not worth it. So
No,
I can't even imagine, you know, having like a member of your wedding party, you know, get arrested for a DUI. You know, what if that was a groom?
Absolutely. Or I mean, like
So-
you were saying, even having like your reception and your ceremony in 2 different locations can be really hard, because there's always the possibility, like, what if somebody got in a car wreck on the way? Like that is the worst absolute like possible thing that could happen. And
It's possible though.
like adding more moving parts can always just make it more difficult throughout the day, and just really like having it in one location, like
Simplify.
if you hunt, absolutely. And
Yeah.
like having a professional photographer, videographer, we're going to find beautiful places in no matter what.
Yeah.
Even like we can turn trash into beauty basically. And so
Downtown Helena, it's pretty rough, but it works.
Like I think the craziest part about that story, like Will said, you know, get one venue for your ceremony and reception. This couple did that, and this still happened. I think that, like, you know, is such a true tale into like, you never know what to expect at weddings, and that you can't control everybody. But I also think the craziest part of the story is that the pastor was involved in that. Like, out of all people, the pastor?
I want to go to his church. Yeah. Venue owners, take note. We need like a locked gate from like 2 p.m. to 10 p.m.
absolutely. Or even like, I mean, even a lot of these venues do hire professional bartenders, and understanding that when people are absolutely obliterated, they need to be cut off. And even like I've seen at a lot of weddings, a really great way to combat that is hiring bus services to the hotel. Like
we've been seeing more buses at every wedding.
Absolutely. And it's a really neat way for like couples and everybody to kind of just like let loose, and then not have to worry with dealing with like being drunk or getting drunk driving or anything. That way everybody's safe and all that stuff. So I think that's a great way. What are the top comments on that one?
So there's only one top comment, and the comment is, "It's awesome story. Groom keeping it classy. LOL." And I think they meant groomsmen, but you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that was a great episode, Will and Carson. I think that was great. So we're going to jump into next episode a little bit deeper into even some of like our own wedding horror stories that we've had and seen, and maybe even go a little bit deeper into going 0 to 100. And we have some other great stuff coming up. So
no, for sure. Yeah, I'm super excited. And, you know, we're so blessed to have this opportunity to, you know, have this podcast for everybody. And, you know, Landon and I kind of had to just learn trial and error. So we want to be able to like help you guys, you know, prevail through this whole industry. So stay tuned. We have a lot of cool content coming, and we're both just super jacked about it. So.
Absolutely. And we'll have our Patreon linked in there too. So we're going to have bonus content on there, maybe some bonus episodes going through like even in deeper, like our gear lists, all that stuff. And just so that you guys have that content, if it's something that's important to you, we'll also have in there for couples, like some of the best, like our vendor recommendations that we recommend for your wedding, and tips and tricks, even like deeper in depth of how to make your wedding day run super smoothly, and combat all the diversity that can happen in a wedding day.
For sure. And that gear thing, I'm just going to side note on that. It's so important. My first year, I saw all this stuff and it was like, oh, I'm going to go buy this A7C. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I blew so much money trying to figure out where I wanted to go with my business. And so, you know, us having that gear list to give to you is, you know, priceless. So.
Absolutely. I agree. So that was a pod.
Heck yeah.
Good talking to you.